Hello, everyone, and welcome along to your Sunday night edition of the TII podcast. My name is Craig Dennett, and I'm joined in the middle of this international break by Ross and JB. We're going to, take you out of a different slant on this tonight. We're obviously in the middle of the international break. Few of our players are out playing for their countries. Plenty of them are hopefully at the Rangers training ground trying to fix whatever's been going on the pitch. But we are going to sort of break down what's been happening at the club, and we'll start to look forward. We've spent a lot of time looking backwards, so now we'll start to look forwards. Ross, how are you doing after a week without Rangers?
I've had a great weekend because Rangers aren't playing, Craig. It's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed myself this weekend, actually, to get a break from them because they're doing my head in at the moment, as I'm sure they are for everyone else. So, yeah, I'm good. I'm looking forward to getting stuck into some of this because I think we're going to cover a lot to do with the club at the moment. So, yeah, all round I'm good, and that's mainly because Rangers aren't playing.
Absolutely. We'd much rather Rangers were playing, but playing and doing well. So,
JB, absolutely, yeah.
JB, how are you doing?
Yeah, similar to Ross, to be honest. I think Rangers free weekends is normally we dread the international break, don't we? But this one I've been quite enjoyed the weekend, so it hasn't been too bad. And but we done the United ticket did arrive yesterday morning, so I don't know whether I'm excited for that or petrified. So, but yeah, I'll look forward to it.
One of the lucky few that got one, JB. So that'll be a good buzz going back to Tannadice and hopefully seeing us turn them over when we get back in action next weekend. But let's just get stuck in, and I see some comments coming in already, which is great. Please do send in your questions, send in your thoughts on whatever we're discussing, and we'll bring up as many as we can as we go through the podcast. Normally I've got a page of notes or whatever. Last week I had 6 pages of notes. This week I've got no notes. So we're just absolutely we're flying by the seat of our pants a little bit, but that's the best way to be at times, and just get stuck into a bit of chat. Ross, I think there's been a lot of focus, especially over the last few weeks, on the board rather than the manager and the players. Everyone's had it at some point, but I think the board have come under more and more scrutiny as we've gone through the last few games, and in particular after last week's performance. Do you think it's fair that they have come under so much scrutiny, and what do you think, I guess, are the next steps? Let's start there. What are the next steps the board can take to try and help us get in some sort of order where we're confident that, okay, we've made mistakes in the past, but we are now, as we move forward, you can see the clear path, you can see the clear strategy, you can see exactly what we want to do, and making ourselves I was going to say a professional organisation, but it almost feels like that's what we need to appear like. I say we've lost JB as well. He was having a few internet issues before we came on, so if he comes back, we'll add him in. But Ross, I'll let you answer that nice and easy question to start us off.
JB obviously didn't want to talk about the Rangers board. He got out before he got asked a question about it. I think first of all, you asked me there, is the criticism fair? And it absolutely is fair. You know, where the club is at the moment, you know, a big part of that is down to the board. You know, the decisions that have been made over the last couple of years has put us where we are. Sorry, that was a lot more difficult to say than I thought it was going to be. And yeah, John Bennett, of course, you know, the chairman's been at the top of that, and I think it's fair to say that his tenure so far hasn't been the best. It's not been the most positive for Rangers. And I think where a lot of fans were disappointed this summer, we keep hearing this term rebuild, but it didn't really turn out to be a rebuild, did it? It was, I think Kieran used the phrase, it was a downsizing. You know, we were getting rid of players on high salaries, and really that was kind of first and foremost what we had to do. And the bringing in players for Philippe Clement to kick on this season was kind of a secondary thing. That's what it appeared like towards the end of the window. I don't think the board had. I think the Ibrox situation really hasn't helped the board this summer because the tensions have been high surrounding that. I mean, the support put a lot of money into this club, yeah, and they follow this club wherever. And to not be able to sit in your season ticket at the start of a season is pretty poor, really. I mean, that's an understatement. It's really difficult to comprehend how we managed to get ourselves in that position. So there's no doubt in my mind that is a big reason why the support were on the board at the start of this season. I mean, that has been the same for the last couple of years, and I really can't blame them. So what's next? I think John Bennett has to put a structure in place that's going to bring success back to the football club. I don't think we have that at the moment. We don't have a CEO with James Bisgrove departing. We don't have an academy director. We have the kind of split director of football, sporting director, when it comes to Craig Robertson and Niels Coppen. And maybe it's early days for those two, but I think it's fair to say we've not really seen a lot of positivity through that yet. Niels Coppen's only been in for, obviously, I think it's 2 windows now, so we have to give him a bit of time. But I think that's got to be first and foremost the focus for the club now. There has to be a structure in place. Every single club, top club, has a really good structure in place that supports on the pitch. And I always look at Manchester City as an example here, right? Because Manchester City have an abundance of money, right? Finances, but they put it into the right areas. You can look at Manchester United in the same side, the same city. That's 2 clubs spending a lot of money every single year, but one of them is way more successful than the other. And that's because Manchester City have a structure in place for Pep Guardiola to thrive in. Manchester United are the opposite, right? So that's the first thing I think we need to focus on at this point, especially when transfer windows are closed. We can't bring in any players. You can't get rid of any, right? I think John Bennett now, until January, has to focus on putting that structure in place and give us the best opportunity for the next couple of years to find success. If we don't have that, we are going to continue to be in this cycle every single year, where the manager's under pressure around October, November, we get rid of him, a new manager comes in, he assesses his squad, he realizes he doesn't like half the players, we have to get half of them out, you bring half in. It's not working, right? So stability on the part, first and foremost. I think we spoke about it last week with Philippe Clement. He's made mistakes, but I think we need stability there. But we have to put a structure in place going forward. We can't continue to be in the position we're in when it comes to the club. Get people in the roles that know what they're doing. Get football people in there that understand what is required of a big club to have success, and go from there.
Yeah, I think JB came in and dropped off again, so maybe it'll just be you and I, Ross, for this podcast, but that's absolutely fine. We can talk about Rangers for hours and hours, so absolutely no issue there. There's plenty of comments coming in, which are great. So I kind of want to just break down your answer a bit there into the different parts. But one of the key things I think you said was around getting the right people in the right roles. John Bennett's obviously been the chairman. I think when he was first appointed chairman, I was kind of expecting it to be a good appointment in terms of he'd come in. He comes from what is the amount of experience he's got, and his background is obviously a finance background that he does come from, but he's been chief exec and CEO and stuff like that of many big companies down there, and that's how he's made his money. But we've had anything but what I expected from John Bennett since he's went into that chairman role. And a lot of people say, well, he's putting his hand in his pocket and he's spending his money to kind of push Rangers forward, and we're all always appreciative of that. But that doesn't necessarily mean you get the right, or you're the right man to be the chairman, the person leading this club. I don't think he's shown that he has the experience or whatever to be able to do that. Would you agree with that at this stage? And it's actually that next appointment, and there's obviously the discussion around the new CEO coming in, and we were potentially expecting a new appointment in the coming weeks, but John Bennett will still be in that chairman role at the same time. How would you assess his tenure as chairman so far, and do you think he should continue in that role?
Well, I said in my last answer, I don't think it's been a very positive tenure for John Bennett so far, but he is in that position, and I can't see John Bennett giving it up. I think we read from Dave King maybe on Friday and saying that John Bennett will be suffering like the fans on this, and he'll want success for the club. But ultimately, we're in that position that doesn't matter. I want success for the club. I'm not Rangers chairman. Do you know what I mean? You've actually got to deliver in that role. And look, it just comes back to my previous answer. I don't think we have enough around John Bennett to help him in terms of directing the football club forward in certain areas. I think that is evident now. We don't have it. We're in that cycle at the moment that we can't seem to break. So it's very difficult for me to sit here and say that John Bennett has had a positive tenure. I'm hoping that he can turn that around, but the last couple of years when he has been the Rangers chairman have been really poor for us. It's been really poor for us since '55, to be honest with you. So obviously that European final, of course, but domestically it's been a shambles. So Yeah, I think it just comes back to what I said in my previous answer, Craig. I think we just have to really, really focus on getting people in there that understand what is required, especially in Scottish football as well, that understand the landscape, understand this rivalry, understand what is required to compete with Celtic, because that's where we are at this point, right? They clearly have created a gap, so we have to focus on plugging that gap and then getting back to sustainable success. We're not going to do that with the current situation we're in.
Yeah, JB, welcome back. Hopefully your internet stays with us as we continue through the rest of the podcast. But I just wanted to bring in a couple of comments that we've had from RFC 72. And JB's left us. So Ross, I'll bring in a couple of comments we've had from RFC 72. First one is, why would we think Bennett would be a good chairman? He was there with Park and was part of the problem. Said that from day one it would be a disaster waiting to happen, and it's been true. And a bit earlier on when you were talking, he also said, I think he said, I'll stop trying to right click and actually click the right button. He said, I think the trust is completely gone with the majority of fans and the board, and we have next to no faith in them turning it around. That's the problem. I think I have to agree with the second comment there. I think in terms of having trust in the board, I think believing that they know what they're doing. I probably lost a bit of that when James Bisgrove went into that sort of chief exec role, and at no point did I think he was necessarily qualified to take up that position for a size of club that we had, nor did I think he had the level of experience that you'd want for someone in that role for us. I think as a commercial manager, as a commercial director, absolutely, you saw the deals he was able to do. There were some questions over, I guess, the quality of the companies that he was signing partnerships with, but he was getting money in the door, and the number of partners went from whatever it was 10 to 40 in the space of like a year and a half. So he was finding new ways, new revenue streams for us. So I think as a commercial person, James Bisgrove was fine. I think I would really question the judgment of making him CEO, and it very much looks like he jumped before he was not necessarily pushed, but before he went into this really, really difficult period. Where do you stand in terms of the level of trust you have with the board at the moment, and the confidence that they can turn this around and make us, I guess, have, I was going to say almost look like a competent football club, but that's maybe a bit harsh. I think have that confidence that they can reinstate that level of professionalism that we expect from people in that level of the club.
Yeah, trust is a weird one. I don't know if I've ever looked at it that way. I think faith is probably the one I'm looking at, or hope. I have a lot of hope and things are going to change, or faith that things are going to change. I'm not sure at this point. I'm not really seeing evidence of that. I have to agree when it comes to James Bisgrove. I did think at the time myself that he was inexperienced in the role. But I actually thought when James Bisgrove came in, he tried a lot of positive things to bridge the gap between the club and the fans. He was trying a lot more of the kind of fan engagement kind of nights at Edmiston House. He obviously created the fan advisory board, things like that. So I think James Bisgrove did recognise that the relationship between the board and the support at that stage when he first came in was already strained, and I thought he was trying to do things to plug that. I think it's now, we've seen that since James Bisgrove left, that there's maybe some things he didn't leave in the right place. And look, I suppose you're never going to really know what happened when it came to the Ibrox situation this summer in the Copeland stand. But if you're the CEO and something like that's going disastrously wrong, then people are going to look at you like you had a part to play in that, and obviously he's departed. I have to say, if you're getting an offer from Saudi Arabia, I would imagine it's very, very difficult to turn down. I would imagine the level of money he's moved on to is astronomical compared to what he was making at Rangers, even though I'm sure he would have been making a very good salary. So I don't judge him for that as such. It has kind of left us short in that area, and we really do have to prioritise trying to find that. I think John Bennett spoke in the interview that he released at the end of July, and he did kind of, there was a part where he was talking about they were very close to having someone coming in.
Yep.
We've not really seen that materialise. Of course, there was a link with I can't actually remember his name. I apologise. The St Mirren vice chairman coming in.
I think it's Andrew Gillespie, but I might be wrong with that one off the top of my head. I think it's Andrew Gillespie.
It's definitely something Gillespie. You're definitely right there. So maybe we've recognised that we want someone to come in with an understanding of Scottish football. But that has to be an appointment we prioritise.
Jim Gillespie.
Jim Gillespie. There we go. It does confuse me that we haven't made that appointment already. You know, we are into September. James Bisgrove left 2 or 3 months ago now. We've had plenty of time to line up a replacement. Now, I understand that it's a really important position in the club, and the club are quite right to take their time and try and find the right candidate. But I think they've had enough time now to make that appointment. So the CEO would be a huge step for us in terms of the structure of the club and trying to fix things. And then I think you go from there. You're hoping the CEO comes in and recognises where the gaps are and we try to plug them. So yeah, I love talking about the Rangers board, Craig, because I know a lot of people just are absolutely sick when it comes to that aspect of the club. And it's very, very difficult to argue with people at the moment because I say it all the time, you know, all everyone really cares about first and foremost is the performance in the park for Rangers. Yeah. If Rangers aren't winning week in, week out, you know, people are going to get frustrated, and quite rightly, that's what we expect at this club. So the Rangers board definitely have to try and put a few things in place to push us on.
Yeah, Luke Gibson 97 says to get back to being successful, it all starts with having a strong and competent board. Once that gets sorted, it should hopefully transmit to the squad. Want to discuss a few different points before we start to look at moving on to the manager and the players and the fans and the various other sort of talking points there are. I think I want to talk about Ibrox being a big issue at this point and how much that has kind of tested, not even tested, just blown to smithereens the patience that any Rangers fan potentially had around a rebuild or a downsizing, depends however you want to describe it. I think had we been at Ibrox going into this season from the start, the board probably get a wee bit more leeway, but they've almost just shot themselves in the foot with, and it's not even, is it the board's fault if someone within the club isn't doing their job? I think that's maybe up for a bit of debate, but they should definitely be the ones overseeing it and the ones that have the final sign off in my sort of project managing that situation through and making sure there's no sort of impact on the team or the club. And it does feel like we've shot ourselves in the foot this season, albeit we will be back at Ibrox to play against Dundee in the League Cup next Saturday. How big a thing is Ibrox in the background in terms of how fans are feeling, in terms of the level of patience that the fans have had, in terms of how quickly, I guess, people across the Rangers fans are well known for, if you had 100 of them in the room, you'd have 105 different views kind of thing. But they're well known for that. But there seems to be a sort of collective agreement that enough's enough almost at this stage now. And while we spoke at length on this podcast about we're going to be patient for this season because it's not going to be great, and we can see what the club are going to do, and it's going to take 2 windows, 3 windows, 4 windows for this squad to get back into any kind of shape where we'll be able to compete. I think when you start to see the reality of that, it's quite difficult to get yourself back in that mindset of I knew this was coming. Even last Sunday against Celtic, at no point did I think, well, I knew this was coming and it's okay because in 2 years' time we'll be back okay. The frustration was very much there in that moment. But how much of a factor is not playing at Ibrox or that delay that there has been for the first sort of month and a half of the season?
Oh, it's massive. It's massive. You know, that's what we all look forward to as a support, going to Ibrox every second week and watching Rangers. I mean, I'd rather watch Rangers draw a game or lose a game in Ibrox than I would in Hampden. You know, I think that's where we really put ourselves at a disadvantage this season, because at the start of this season anyway, because the support were already feeling a level of negativity showing up to the games because no one wanted to be at Hampden, and it's understandable. I've said it in the podcast before, I hate Hampden. It's just a terrible football stadium. It's awful. It's just not a good fan experience at all. You can't see the game. It's just really, really difficult to get yourself excited for a game at Hampden, regardless of whether Rangers are playing or not. Of course, usually when we're going, it's semi-finals and finals. Of course, you're there to support your team. But in terms of the stadium itself, it's awful. So if you know that's going to be your home ground for the foreseeable future, because at this, a couple of months ago, we didn't really know how long it was going to be that we were in Hampden. I think it's really positive now that we have a date that we're going back to Ibrox. We know that the the Hampden fiasco is now dead, so that helps. I think it really will help the support. I think the atmosphere against Dundee should be really, really good for the players coming into it, and that's a real positive for a lot of the new players in this squad because they haven't really experienced Ibrox yet. And there's no doubt any player coming to sign for Rangers will look at the Ibrox atmosphere as one of the reasons why they want to play for Rangers. There's no doubt their agents will be showing them clips of European nights at Ibrox, and they'll be like, I want to be part of that. Because you hear other European players talk about the atmosphere at Ibrox when they've came to play in it. I think I've seen a clip of that boy from Braga talking about it the other day as well. So, that is massive for the players. It's massive for the manager, and it's massive for the support. Just everyone involved with the club wants to be playing at Ibrox. So, yeah, they really put themselves at a disadvantage at the start of this season in terms of where the blame lies for that. Look, when you're managing any project, things can go wrong kind of outside your control. But at the end of the day, it's Rangers' project. And if it goes wrong, it's their responsibility. That's just the way it works, unfortunately. They can say that things are held up in certain ports throughout the world and they can't have anything to do with it. Okay, I can understand that, but it's your project. You've got a timeline on it. The support have all bought into that, and now you've pushed that back. People can't get into their season ticket seat. Obviously, for the Dundee game, the Copeland stand is still closed, so there's people that will still have to wait to get back into their season ticket. And I've said this before, the support are well entitled to have a furious reaction to that because they put in a lot of money, like a lot of money. And at this club, I know the investors put in a lot of money, but so did the support, and I think the bare minimum you expect is to be sitting in your seat. It really is just to be sitting in your seat. And it's huge for everyone in terms of, lifestyle, mentally, whatever. The people that you go to the game with, family, friends, the match day experience, all that was kind of lost going to Hampden. So
I think no more was that scene than against Dynamo Kyiv in the Champions League qualifier when there was that whole stand behind the goal that was pretty much empty, and you would never see that at Ibrox, like that number of tickets spare for a Champions League qualifier at home where you've drawn the first leg away. The team needs the backing to get a win to then get through, get an extra 5 million euros or whatever it was, and the impact that would have had in terms of us being able to sign another player, potentially another 2 players, and the knock-on effect of the quality of the squad, the quality of the players we have on the pitch as we go through this first, I don't know, I was trying to work out quickly how far away January was, first 3 months of the season that we've got left to go. But I think it just breeds that negativity, and I think that seeing that was actually a real surprise for me. I know a big part of that will be down to the fact that the CCCS wasn't enacted for Hampden, and it meant that if you're a season ticket holder and you could kind of choose if you wanted to pay for the extra games rather than the money being taken straight out of your bank account. I've noticed that Rangers were very quick to turn that back on for the Dundee game the other day when the money came out of my bank account. But it gave people the choice, and I think when you give people the choice, more often than not they'll take it. But I think this season, and the mood music around Rangers and how fans are feeling, and the level of confidence or lack of confidence that they had about whether they'd be able to go through or not, it was just a perfect storm for people to just say, actually, you know what, I'll probably just save the 35 quid or the 30 quid, whatever it was, for that game. And I think that was the first clear sign, I think, of people of the mood amongst the fans being made obvious.
The Ibrox atmosphere is huge as well for that European tie. You'd think of we got a really good result in the first leg against Kyiv, and of course, at that point when you score late, I would be lying if I didn't think at that point, right, we're in pole position here to qualify. But I would have certainly felt a lot more confident if I knew that home tie was at Ibrox, because of the atmosphere that the fans have been able to generate in the last few years in European ties. And I also think the support aren't daft, right? We know where we are at this point. We know that this squad isn't as strong as we want it to be, and the support would have got right behind the team that night at Ibrox. We would recognise that the team need that. Philippe Clement spoke about that on several occasions, that he wants the fans to be right behind the players because they can make a difference. The support would have been able to do that at Ibrox. So not being able to do that, there's no doubt in my mind, contributed to that result at Hampden. You know, it's not your home ground. I think Dynamo Kyiv would have been coming there with a lot more confidence because it's like, well, they're not playing at home. We weren't playing at home. They're not playing at home. It's very even. You do rely on those home atmospheres and European ties. All clubs do. And the fact that we didn't get that this season, you know, it is a lot of money. I know a lot of people look at it and go, you know, 4 million parachute payment, you know, that was probably the money that was sitting there reserved to go and get Abdallah Sima. There's no doubt in my mind that definitely that exit from the Champions League contributed to Abdallah Sima moving on, because it was a couple of days later and then he put out his farewell statement to Rangers fans, right? So you can put 2 and 2 together. I'm sure the club would have been reserving that money to go and do something with it. So it's massive for where we are at the moment. So yeah, the Ibrox, I'm glad that's coming towards an end now, because you know the minimum you expect is being able to go and watch Rangers at Ibrox every second week. That's where we all started as wee boys, you know, going with your dad, your grandparents, whatever, whoever took you, and walking into that stadium for the first time and seeing it. You know, you still have that wee bit in you every time you go. We've been fortunate enough as well to cover games with the podcast, and sitting in that stadium when there's no one else in it, it's like it's a surreal experience as well. So there's just something about that stadium that everyone grips onto. So I'm glad that the Hampden stuff's coming to an end and we can just get back to Ibrox and kick on from there.
Absolutely. And just the final bit on the board before we move on to talk about Philippe Clement, and we've plenty of comments coming already about the manager across the full spectrum of what you could expect from people's views on Philippe Clement. But just on the board, they've spoken a lot about communication and the fact that that's not been good enough, but they want to try and improve it. It's not improved in any way whatsoever. It's potentially got worse if it could have gotten worse. Why do you think they find it so difficult to do that? Why do you think they find it so difficult to be more open, more transparent with the fan base? Is it just we know it's not going well, they know it's not going well, and they don't really want to show everyone why it's not going well or how it's not going well? Do you think it's as simple as that, or do you think it's actually they are trying and they're just bad at it, or what's your view on it?
That's a tough one. I don't know the answer to this, I'll be honest. I mean, it probably is a lot easier to come out and speak to the support when things are going well. That's easy. I'm sure they'll be absolutely desperate to write statements when things are going really well. When it comes to our communication at the moment, I spoke about it when John Bennett came out a couple of months ago in that interview, and I just said, you know, from here, let's try and improve the communication. Now, that's been a couple of months, and maybe I wouldn't expect to have communication every month or two or whatever, but I think every quarter we should probably hear from someone at the top of the club, whether that's John Bennett or whether that's someone he appoints as CEO. I don't know, but I think we do need more communication across the board. We don't have it at the moment. I think even a good example of this, I think, is the Danilo news that we got on Thursday.
Yeah.
And I don't really understand why the club put themselves in that position, because I've noticed a lot of the kind of other top clubs in Europe, when they do have a significant injury to one of their good players or whatever, it doesn't even need to be a significant injury. It's just someone's been injured, right? And they understand that the fans are going to be frustrated about it. Just tell the fans ahead of the Europa League announcement, just release a statement and just say, look, Danilo's had he's had I was going to say reoccurrence. It's not a reoccurrence, but anyway, he's having some difficulty with his knee. He's going to be assessed in the Netherlands. He'll be out for 3 or 4 weeks, right? See if you get ahead of things a wee bit. The support will be like, oh, well, you know, at least you've let us know. You've not released the Europa League squad and we see he's not in it. And then everyone just goes mental. I just think that's a really easy one. Like, that's really easy for me.
You get fans that spot him at an airport and then they take pictures and he's wearing a leg brace and you're like, well,
exactly.
Much way for this to be done in a sensible way.
I just think they could really help themselves with things like that. Like, just get ahead of things. You know that the fans are not going to react well to Danilo being injured. Obviously, we all want Danilo to be playing football, right? But I think you will get a bit of credit from the fans if you're just ahead of things and just say, look, here's what it is. This is the timeline for him coming back. And then Europa League squad comes out and then everyone understands why he's not in it.
Yeah.
The way it's happened is Europa League squad comes out and everyone absolutely riots because Danilo's not in it. And everyone goes, oh, look, there we go. Danilo's been injured for months. No one said anything about it. Everyone's been denying it. It's just, we really do have to help ourselves in these situations. But overall, yeah, look, the communication's been poor for a long time. when it comes to Rangers. That is something that has to be focused on. I would imagine that's not John Bennett's focus at the moment, to be honest with you. I would imagine he's probably looking, there's a lot more things to focus on and get things fixed properly. But after that, and there's a good structure in place, you have to communicate with the fans. You've got to. You can't just go radio silent on a lot of things. I've said this in the previous answer. Fans put in a lot of money, support put in a lot of money. They deserve communication on certain issues around the club. You don't have to sugarcoat everything. Just say it as it is. The fans will respect that. They're not daft. So I'd like to see that going forward.
Yeah, well, one of the ways that the board have been decisive was in offering Philippe Clement a new updated contract. I think they saw what's happening coming, and I think they wanted to take away the noise around Philippe Clement's job. They wanted to, which I think was the right thing to do in terms of the way they updated it and saying we've been in this cycle of a manager gets to October, we sack him. We've been in that cycle and we've spoken at length about that, and we all want to get out of that. We don't want to be sacking a manager every year and just writing off 3/4 of a season and that being the case all the time. And I think it was the right thing. If you know there's going to be a tough start to the season, you know that you're trying to downsize the wage bill, so therefore the quality of the squad. You're bringing in younger players, you're bringing in players who aren't as experienced as the ones that are leaving, and it's players that might take a wee bit of time to bed in as well. So all of that makes sense, and all of that decision makes sense. I think what is interesting, and I'll bring up comments in a second that kind of go across the spectrum, but I think what's interesting is when Philippe Clement comes under pressure, he's come under pressure from some fans already. I think the majority are still understanding that he's working with two hands tied behind his back and he's trying to get the best, but there's still a lot of questions over on-field decisions, formations, players he's picking for certain games, substitutions, all of that. There's questions about all of that, and rightly so. But before I bring up the sort of comments from the listeners and the viewers, where do you stand with Philippe Clement at this moment in time, and your level of confidence in him as a Rangers manager that's able to one, able to get us performing in the park, and two, able to help us reach the stage where we're back competitive and winning trophies?
Yeah, that's a difficult one to answer after watching your team get battered in an Old Firm last week. So I would be lying if I said that my confidence in the manager wasn't dented. I still believe that Philippe Clement is the right man for the job. I think that comes back to why Rangers appointed him in the first place, and I think he has a lot of experience in Belgium with rebuilding sides and bringing success. He was able to show that at two clubs, both Genk and Club Brugge. He built really, really good sides, and they went on and he won titles. So I think that's where that comes down to. I think that's also the contract why he was given it, because Philippe Clement obviously came out in the summer in certain interviews and he said, the situation is not as I would imagine it was supposed to be. I was told something kind of different, but this is the reality we're in now. And I think maybe the club recognise that. They've been honest with the manager, and I think both parties have decided, we're going to put these things to the side and we're going to try and kick on together. And that contract shows the board have faith in Philippe Clement, and Philippe Clement wants to be part of this project, because I think there's a lot of other managers that might have got to the situation that Clement was in this summer, and they might have walked, to be honest with you. If you were promised a certain scenario at a club, you've signed up for it and it's turned out to not be the case. He might have looked at that and went, there's a real risk that my reputation goes here if that's another job that I'm not successful in, because he did struggle towards the end at Monaco and he was sacked. So he could have left. I think he's decided to stay for the right reasons. I think he genuinely does care about the success of the club. I think he's fallen in love with the club, and I think most managers that come here get the same thing. Steven Gerrard was exactly the same. He fell in love with Rangers. He loved the passion of the support and every game meaning something, because that's rare. You don't get that at a lot of clubs, that every single game you must win. And I think managers do fall in love with that. At the other side, I think Philippe Clement has struggled the last, I would have to say the last 4 months of football, really. I think I've seen a I can't actually remember the statistic off the top of my head, but there was something a crazy statistic. I think it was he's won 40% of his last.
Yeah. So the stat I was going to speak about that next. So he won, and it was kind of based on this comment that Gibson 97 brought up. I missed the comment from his first 6 months. Need that manager back. When Philippe Clement came in, we won 18 of the first 20 games that he was manager for. Since then, our win rate is 40%, which is miles off it. Absolutely miles off it of what's expected as a base level standard for a Rangers manager. Never mind a Rangers manager that's trying to build on some success and build towards a sort of league title challenge.
Yeah, I mean that is a crazy statistic, to be honest with you. That it's hard to get your head around that as a Rangers manager, that it's a 40% win rate at this point. Now, I'm sure he'll improve on that in the next couple of months because Rangers will start winning games again in the league. But yeah, that's a difficult one. I think I spoke about it in my answer about the Rangers board. We've not really left Philippe Clement a lot to work with this summer. Now, that is not giving him a pass completely, but I think we can all say that the recruitment has left the manager short in certain areas. He's also been really unlucky with a lot of injuries, so I'll give him that. What I do think is a worry for Philippe Clement, and I think we've seen it at the end of last season, I always think with any manager and a change at any club, you always see a bounce, right? A manager comes in, they play a different way, there's a freshness, all the players at the club are rejuvenated because I think there's someone else here that I need to impress now, and I need to be at the top of my game to play here. There's also players that weren't playing that were like, I've got a real chance now. So everyone's pushing each other. And I think you got to a point where Rangers went on a great run. He got us back to a really, really good position that we weren't in before he came. And then I think towards the end of the season, probably as things started to develop in the background with the club, there's certain players probably been told that they're not going to be here next season in terms of contracts. There's probably certain players been told early, we don't see a future with you here. You might actually start looking around for players for another club, should I say. And I think that's where you've seen a drop off, and the manager unfortunately wasn't able to turn that around. That's, of course, there's individuals involved there. The thing that worries me about the manager is I'm not sure really what he's trying to do tactically as it stands, and I think that's a real worry for the whole support. I don't see a real identity of what the manager's trying to do. I understand he's probably going to come forward and say, I don't have the players at the moment to really develop my style of football.
Surely that's though when you tailor your approach to the players you have available to you, rather than saying, I've got this ideology where we always play this way and no matter what. And I think there's a lot of people, football fans included, people who love Football Manager, people who love playing FIFA, all that sort of stuff, get stuck on ideologies now, and we all have to play the Pep Guardiola way of everyone passing out from the back, and every goal has to be about 40 passes before you score it and stuff like that. I think there comes a point, especially when you're looking at the difference in standard of player from the top of the English Premier League to playing in Scotland, and what we see coming to play at clubs like ourselves, clubs like Celtic. The level of player is much lower than that, and you need to accept that at some point. I think I saw Roy Keane going mental on the overlap this week because MK Dons were consistently trying to play out at the back against Salford City, and they were 1-0 down with 15 minutes left, and they continued trying to play out at the back, and he was like, no, get the ball forward and try and get a goal back so you can try and win. But I think you've got to play to the type of football where it matches up with the quality and the level of players that you have available to you, and also plays to their strengths and minimises their weaknesses. You've also got to play a type of football that's going to win you games. You can't just stick to an ideology of this is how I want to play and then struggle. You can't go into a game like we did against Celtic last week and the first 10 minutes suggest that Philippe Clement asked us to play one way and then the players couldn't execute it for longer than 10-15 minutes potentially. But he still has 80 minutes that he needs to manage through that game and make sure the team can do their utmost. And I completely get the concerns that you have, Ross, in terms of not seeing a style of play. There's some people that I think have said Walter Smith never really had too much of a style of play. He adapted it to the team we were playing against, and that's how he saw success. I'm not even. I don't even feel like we're adapting at each game to the team we're playing against. I don't see enough of an obvious difference to suggest that. Do you see that at all? Or I guess it's like you said, it's hard to pinpoint a way that they want us to play apart from the odd moment here and there.
Yeah, I think in the Old Firm fixtures, I don't really see us changing our approach towards Celtic, and I think that's why those games, I think Celtic have had especially the weekend, they had the better opportunities, because I don't see us trying to negate their strengths. Now, I understand you don't want to go into every game and you just want to look at the opposition. You want to change everything you're doing because you want to stop the other team. Because at that point, once you've got possession of the ball, what are you going to do? Your whole game plan is about stopping the other side. You need to understand when you've got it that you've got the best opportunity to do something. But I don't really see them maybe understanding where we are at this point when it comes to that fixture, and that they're better than us right now. I really don't enjoy saying it, but they're better than us, and going to Parkhead, it's very difficult. And I kind of want the manager to recognise that he can't just play the standard kind of 4-2-3-1 again, and the players are going to get him out of it. I didn't see any evidence of that at the weekend. I think this kind of 4-4-2 thing he's doing off the ball, where he's having Dessers at the front and whoever alongside him, Diamonde or Lawrence, and it might be Bajrami when he comes in. I just don't think it works. I just don't. Dessers seems to commit himself into a press, and straight away teams just pass around him. And this also isn't just against Celtic, by the way. We are quite vulnerable when the ball turns over against any team in the league. So I think that's something the manager has to look at, especially that kind of midfield shape. I don't think he's getting the best out of the players in there at the moment. But overall, I think Philippe Clement style is I don't think he's really bothered about a style as such. I think he is a manager that kind of wants to move the ball from back to front as quickly as possible. Now, a lot of people might have looked at that at the weekend with the John Souttar and Robin Propper passing back and forth to each other for 10 minutes in the Old Firm. But that was because Celtic wanted us to have the ball there, right? They were pushing us into those areas. They were setting up traps in midfield. And when we played the ball in, they were trying to nick it off us because they knew how vulnerable we were when the ball turned over. So
I also felt, though, that we were quite happy to do that, and we're actually trying to draw Celtic out a wee bit in terms of move them out of their sort of the structured defensive shape that they kind of went back into to create the gaps for us. I think it worked once or twice, but actually the thing that worked best, and we never took advantage of it once, was John Souttar running forward and breaking the lines and causing a bit of chaos in there by doing so. But we never took advantage of that once. And we spoke last week's podcast about the frustration of he moves forward, he gets into the midfield, he passes the ball into Dessers, and Dessers plays it to James Tavernier at right back, and it just goes.
Forgot about that. You've just ruined my whole weekend. I'm visualising that as passage of play again. Thanks very much for that. But yeah, I think there's a lot for the manager to work on. I actually agree with what you're saying there in terms of, I would rather the manager looked at it, and I'm fine with a manager coming in and thinking, this is the way I want my side to set up, this is the way I want my side to play, right? But if you've got a 40% win rate, you're probably not doing something right. Okay, we can't go through and blame injuries, and it's Philippe Clement's responsibility to get the results in the park. If he's not getting them, he has to look at himself. We can't just continue to blame the players and the individuals, because there's been a lot of turnover in that squad this summer. Now, are we at a place where we want to be? No. But there's been a lot of turnover, and we're still seeing the same patterns that we've seen at the end of last season. Now, that's got to come down to the manager and his staff. You can't always blame the players. Can the players do more in these type of games? Can they show a wee bit more, grit and determination? Can they understand the game they're in? Can they make it difficult for the opposition? Can they win their 1v1s and their duels? If they can do that, we've got a much better chance, because at this point, they don't even do that, right? But I do think you've got to have a look at the manager here. He has got to understand it's his responsibility to set the team up in the way to get a result. You spoke about that earlier. We can't just continue to do the same thing because that's the way that Philippe Clement wants to play. He wants to play two midfielders, and he wants to play a number 10. I don't really see it working, and I don't see it working in a fixture where you're coming up against a side like Celtic, who are going to have so many movements in midfield, so many rotations between the fullback and the midfielder, and they're going to have so many runners off the ball. I just think we really put ourselves at a disadvantage at these fixtures. And I think that's something that Clement has to look at, because ultimately where we are right now, Celtic are going to drop a lot of points in this league. So the Old Firm is becoming really, really important when it comes to a title race. We have to compete in these fixtures. He's had 5 of them now. He's not won any.
Yeah.
So manager has to look at himself. That doesn't change my point of view on that. I think he's the right man for the job. I do. I actually do have faith in Clement. I think he's got the right, attitude towards this. I think he's got the right mentality. He just has to get that onto the park with his players. Easier said than done.
Absolutely easier said than done. I've been trailing these comments from about 25 minutes in, but I will bring them up now in terms of the spread of view towards the manager. Robert Binney said, if the board can't fully back the manager, what chance do we have in the immediate future? I'll come back to that one, Ross, in a minute or two, and just speak about the backing that he's had so far. Seafood Neat It says, Rome wasn't built in a day. At what point do we start to back the club and players, or will it be our downfall? Almost every podcast is full of negativity, and it breeds negativity. I'm not quite sure how negative we are as a podcast. I always like to think we are pretty balanced, but I'll take it on the chin that we were negative after we lost to Celtic. Conan Mackay.
Oh yeah, I'll take it on the chin for that one. Yeah, I definitely was after that one.
Conan Mackay said last week, get rid of Clement. He's hanging on by a thread at this moment. 1 or 2 bad results and can't see him lasting. Sid says, look at what Clement did when he first arrived. We were 7 points behind. John Moffat says Clement won't last either. He's starting to crumble now. I'll pick up on a couple of those, Ross. First of all, just the one that spoke about Robert Binney's one that says that if the board can't fully back the manager, what chance do we have? And I guess that touches on a bit of a point that you made earlier on around what Clement was promised when he first came in, then seemed to have changed, and he would have been entirely within his rights to just walk away at that point and say, well, I came in, I was promised one thing, another thing happened. I can't risk my reputation on that. Do you feel that Clement has been backed? The board would probably argue that he's been given a decent amount of money across the 2 transfer windows so far. I don't view it that way. I don't think he's been backed anywhere close to how other managers have been. Even Gio, to an extent, who we didn't think was backed either, has been backed more than Clement has. Clement's also had to battle against the need to reduce the wage bill as well, which no other manager has had as well. Where do you stand on if he's been backed or not?
He's certainly not been back to the level that I would want this manager to be backed, and I think a lot of the support have the same frustrations here. Steven Gerrard delivered that title for us and wanted to kick on and wasn't backed. Right now, there was a certain point to that. I think that Gerrard maybe wasn't willing to let go of a few of his players, and I think that was maybe where the divide came between the club and Gerrard, that, okay, you want to keep a hold of those players, but ultimately then we're going to find it difficult to bring others in to push us to another level. We don't have those finances. So again, the board probably should have been stronger at that point and said, okay, we will give you money, but we're going to have to sell a couple. So that's difficult. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst comes in, and I remember that there had been a lot of debate around how much money Rangers were going to spend once they qualify for that Champions League, because we all thought, well, there you go, you've guaranteed yourself that money coming in this season. Let's go and give the manager the best chance. And I remember Giovanni Van Bronckhorst at this press conference saying, "Oh, I was happy with my squad. I wasn't bothered about." And everyone's like, "You're at it. No way. We are short here." Then I think this is the bit that frustrates people the most. Michael Beale comes in, who has absolutely no experience of recruiting players in terms of being a manager, right? And then you hear all these stories about he's flying off to Italy and he's meeting all these players. And as soon as I heard this, I was like, alarm bells. I don't want my manager doing that. I don't want him doing that. I want my manager at the club dealing with the players in the park, right? On the pitch. That's what I want him to be looking at. I'm not really bothered about him flying off and meeting Cyril Dessers in Italy and asking him whether he wants to come and play for Rangers. And then obviously you come on to the next manager, and Philippe Clement, who has had nowhere near the same level of backing as Michael Beale when he first came in. Now, there has been money spent. Mohamed Diamande is a big outlay for the club, and I think in January that was a point where we maybe felt that, you know, did we have to go in and get Diamande at that value? Now, it's turned out that I actually think $4.5 million is probably cheap for Diamande, to be honest with you. I think if a top 5 league team were coming in for him when he was at Nordsjælland, I think they would have been paying double that based on the qualities he had. Now, I know there's maybe a lot of people would be thinking, what you talked about. But Diamonde, I think, is a really good player. We've obviously spent a lot of money on Oscar Cortez, and that has not went the way that the manager would have wanted. Right, so that there has been significant outlays, Bajrami as well. But I think overall, we all feel as a support that the manager hasn't been given everything he needs to kick us on. So my previous answer where I'm talking about my worries about the manager, that they are valid, but I do always kind of caveat it with, I can't go through the whole summer and say, this squad isn't ready, we don't have enough, there isn't enough quality. And then when things don't go well, I go, oh, well, it's all on the manager. It's not all on the manager. He has to take his share of the blame here, of course. But I think it is fair to say that he hasn't had the level of backing that we would want a Rangers manager to have. Now, that might be why he signed that contract, right? Because there may be an agreement between him and the board of, okay, this season's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
But if we can bring the wage budget down and we can keep spending at a reasonable level, see, when it comes to January and next summer, you'll have a lot more to go with, and we will back you at that point when we can. And maybe that's been an agreement behind the scenes. Now, that is awful to think about as a fan, because you've got to accept that the season's going to be really, really difficult. But Philippe Clement continues to talk about the long term, and maybe he's bought into it. And that, just before I finish my answer, that's something that I think Clement could really help himself with if he starts making decisions for the long term. So if he starts to try and bring in a Hamza Egamani and play him more often, that's a player for the long term. When Danilo's fit, if he starts to give Danilo the minutes I think we all want, that's a decision for the long term as well. We have to build this team around players that we believe in for the long-term success of Rangers. We can't be making decisions for the short term this season. It's not going to work because we'll be in the same position next summer again, right? Let's start making if Philippe Clement it truly buys in to this long-term plan, he has to make long-term decisions on the pitch as well. He has to. That doesn't mean he gets a free pass again. He just plays any players. He's got to find a tactical style and a system that fits the players in his squad. But I do want him to look at it and think, if I play these certain players, that's going to give us a better chance in the future, or the club's going to have a better chance in the future for success. I want to see that as well. And I also think with the supporters at the moment, Craig, I think they'll back that. I really do think the support will back it. If you see Igamani, Danilo, Cortez in this side with a Diamonde or a Rascan or whatever, I think the fans will go, well, this is good. We're starting to build a team for the future. Young players, we're basing it around young players. The big one is always going to be James Tavernier at right back. Until he goes, I think a lot of the support are not going to have that freshness. But Clement can do all he can around Tavernier to try and bring that kind of, that long-term plan in place on the pitch.
Yeah, it's difficult to argue with much of what you said there at all. The other point that came up in the comments, and this will be the last one on Clement before we move on to the players as such. One of the comments said that people were saying that Clement should have gone last week, and they're very set in their ways and they won't change that. I always think once someone is signed out on a manager as such, if they've given up on the fact that manager's never going to do anything for the club and never going to be able to make us a success, the more and more that group grows, it becomes really difficult for a manager to almost continue in that space. I think we saw it with the weeks leading up to when Giovanni Van Bronckhorst was sacked. We saw it in the weeks leading up to when Michael Beale was sacked as well. Just the groundswell of more and more people just saying, this isn't working, we need a change here. Do you think, I guess I have a slight concern that the fans will start to decide that Philippe Clement isn't the one, but he's also been given this brand new contract to show he's the man the board believe is the one in the future, and that then creates a very contrasting view, or maybe builds towards being a very toxic view of how the club could be, where the club sticks with a manager but the fans don't want a manager anymore. Is that a concern for you at this stage?
No, I don't think so, because I think the majority of the sport recognise that the manager's going to be here for the season. That was the whole point of that contract. Now, that, like I said in previous answers, isn't going to give him a free pass. He's still got to deliver. There's got to be a certain level of success at Rangers every single season. And I think the support has to see progression this season, because Steven Gerrard had 3 years to build a side capable of winning a title. That it's very difficult to accept that it might be that sort of timeline again. But what you had with Steven Gerrard was progression. You seen something building. You understood what the manager was putting into his side. You understood the recruitment that the club were making to build that side. So I think Philippe Clement's got to have similar. It doesn't really worry me when it comes to the support. And there's always going to be people that don't like the manager. That's just, there were probably people that didn't like Philippe Clement when he was appointed, right? So that part doesn't concern me. My question back to that would always be, do you really believe that changing the manager is going to make a difference at this point? Because that is why you change a manager. You change a manager because you believe someone else can come in and do better in the position he's in. And most of the time, I have always felt that a manager coming into Rangers would do better than the previous. It was when Michael Beale was on the edge last summer, I knew someone could come in and get more out of this squad that Michael Beale was getting. It was obvious. I don't feel the same way with Philippe Clement. Now, he might be lucky in that sense, and it sounds a weird way of describing it, but because we've downsized so much and we removed a lot of players in the squad, you maybe do give him a wee bit more leeway. If he maybe had the same level of budget as Michael Beale did and he was getting results like he is at the moment, I think a lot of people would go, that this manager's not got a future here. But that's got to play a part for me, and that would be the always way I look at it, Craig. I just don't believe any other manager comes into this and changes our fortunes right now. I think we need stability, and I think that's what the manager gives us. Now, does that mean I'm going to, ignore all the results this season and not get angry at times with the manager? I've been angry with him this season already, so that's going to continue. But I'm just not convinced that you bring someone else in that they're going to get more of a tune out of this current squad. I think you've got to let the manager try and build something at least this season. Yeah. I think it's fair to get through this season, get to the summer, and we assess again. But I think we've got to give him this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We've almost reached the hour already. I did tell you Ross and I could talk about Rangers for hours and hours and hours, and it's very much proven to be the case. Just to finish us off for this podcast, and thank you very much everyone who's joined us so far. If you do enjoy the content, just drop a like on the video. It's always appreciated, and make sure you subscribe to the TII YouTube channel or to the audio platform, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you are. But just to finish us off, Ross, the players, we have the players we have at this stage, where there's no changing that now, unless you dip into the free transfer market, which I've seen a few people kind of suggesting we should try to pick up a holding midfielder from that sort of free transfer. The players that are available on free transfers, I'm not quite sure Adrian Rabiot is going to come to Rangers anytime soon, as I've seen suggested. But with the players, and we saw some of the same frailties we've seen many, many times in the past at Celtic Park last week again. What do we need from these players as we move forward between now and January, when some changes could potentially be made again? Firstly, what do we need from them? And secondly, where should we pitch our expectations, knowing as we do that this is a very limited quality of squad?
Oh, what do we need from them? What a question. What do we need from it? I think they just need to understand where they are at the moment, and they need to get right behind this manager, because I think at times the body language from a lot of the players has been pretty poor this season, and I felt that at Parkhead at the weekend. You need a really, really strong mentality to play for Rangers. You do. You're under constant pressure. You're expected to win every single game, and a lot of the support, regardless of how we feel about the squad at the moment, would have been going into that game at Parkhead and expecting that team to go and win that game. That is the club that you play for. The players are going to have to understand that, and they're going to have to understand that quickly. So I'm expecting big players in that dressing room to drag people through at the moment. I'm looking for more from a Jack Butland and a John Souttar, even a Robin Proper coming in with experience. I'm scared to mention James Tavernier because I know the reaction that he's had in the last week, but he is the captain as it stands, and this is the moments where he has to stand up and try and deliver. I can understand a lot of the support feeling that's just not going to happen at this point, and I find it really difficult to argue against now. Even though I have tried to defend James Tavernier in the past, I don't think I can at this point. But yeah, I think, look, I spoke about it last week. I think the staff, the management staff and the players probably have to just recognise where they are, and they have to cut the season into blocks now, right? Come back against Dundee United, got to go win that game. Then you go into European tie, you've got to try and win that as well. You've got to try and get points on the board. I think we've just got to go from there. I think Rangers' run of fixtures was okay when they come back. So let's try and put a run together. Let's try and get bodies back into the side that haven't been there, like Nicholas Raskin, like an Oscar Cortez, Bajrami coming in, a bit of freshness, Hamza Gaman coming on at Parkhead and look good. Let's try and get these guys in. Let's try and bring a bit more energy into this side. But I think it's got to be a collective. You know, the manager's got to do more with the players he's got, and the players have to deliver when they go into that park. It's very easy for us to sit in this podcast, Craig, and say X, Y, and Z, what is expected of these players and what they need to do. They're under constant pressure at this club, but that's what comes with it. So they need to go to Tannadice next week and they need to get a result and go from there. And let's try and build a wee bit of positivity again, knowing that we go back to Ibrox a week later. Yeah,
absolutely. And in terms of I think my last question is around where our level of expectation should really sit. I'm finding that really hard to judge as a fan at the moment, in terms of I have the same expectations of this Rangers team as I have of every Rangers team as we go into every new season, and that's to win every single game. It doesn't change, despite how much I tell myself during the summer that I know that's going to be a difficult season. That just doesn't change in the slightest. And are my expectations going to change of this squad? They'll maybe change in the way that I maybe won't turn up to Ibrox every week fully expecting us to win 3 or 4-0, but I still expect us to win the game, and I still expect us to put on a bit of a performance and to have more than enough to beat the vast majority of teams in this league, and to put up a fight against Celtic when that game comes round at the start of January, and take it from there. And I fully expect us to go on a winning run as well. I don't necessarily have the evidence to back up that expectation, and to see us win every game between now and win every domestic game, I should say, between now and the next international break. It's only 4 weeks. You get five domestic games, I think, and 2 European games. Go and win them and put some European points on the board, and because we need to win our favourable fixtures, I guess, are at the start of that European group, whereas the difficult ones are at the end. So we need to get the points on the board early to give ourselves any chance of qualifying. So my expectations haven't really changed. And how fair or unfair that is, I'm not really sure, but my expectations haven't really changed as we go into this next part of the season. And actually, I'm almost my expectations have increased, because I'm saying, right, on you go, show me something. Go and show me something. Go show me you can win a difficult game. Go show me you can put in solid performances and correct the mistakes that have been made so far. I guess we'll find out over the coming weeks if that bears fruit. But we're just over the hour mark, so I think we'll call it a day there. Ross, thank you very much for joining us for that podcast. That was a good discussion. Always good to get talking about Rangers during international breaks, which can feel quite lengthy. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening as well and joining us. It's been enjoyable having your company. I just see people commenting there that Portugal have scored in the last couple of minutes to go 2-1 up against Scotland. So it's 2 games in a row Scotland have conceded in the dying minutes to lose. So probably typical Scotland. I think that's fair to say. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And Kyle and the guys will be back on Wednesday night as we start our build up towards Dundee United and Rangers being back in domestic action, which, despite some of the tone of what we've spoken about, I am very much looking forward to. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Until next time, goodbye.